Hey, welcome to Questing Vikings, and right now I have a special deck profile with Simon Nielsen, and you just got top 64 here at the challenge in Bologna. And what is amazing about it is that you actually don't really play Lorcana because you're a Magic player, and that's where people know you from.
Yes, I am a professional Magic the Gathering player, and I picked up Lorcana last Wednesday, 5 days ago. I have, I did know of the game, have watched some videos, know the rules, but I haven't actually played a game before this week. And but yeah, it's quite intuitive actually. Like from a Magic player perspective, the two games are similar enough that this tournament went, above expectation, and I made sub 64.
And it ended up being a really great deck because of the venue. We talked about like what we expected the decks to be, and Sapphire Steel was a lot more than we expected. How many did you face?
I only faced a single Sapphire Steel, and then I faced a Ruby Sapphire matchup that was built to be more grindy, so like my version was better, the classic version was better as well.
Yep. Let's see.
Yeah, so I'm playing Sapphire Ruby. It was I really enjoyed this deck. It was very very fun to play, and the very little amount of playtesting I did. And the main thing that convinced me to play this is that all the Ruby Amethyst guides said that the blue-red decks were the best matchups for them. That's what you really wanted to face, and that you would always win. So that's would scare me off playing this deck. But then when I actually played those matchups, and once I learned what you're supposed to do, it seemed more like 50-50. And if your worst matchup is 50-50, that's incredible. So I figured I can probably reasonably often go 1-1 against all the Ruby Amethyst players I meet, and maybe I'll be able to 2-0 the rest, and that's literally exactly what happened. So the way this deck is built, just gonna go from just people who for those of you who don't know exactly what this deck does, it's essentially a ramp deck. We try to start our game with one jump ahead every single time, and just try to get ahead of ink from our opponents here. And this means that I'm going to mulligan very aggressively for this card, because there's not much else you can do on two, and the deck is kind of clunky if you don't have it. So definitely the most important card in the deck. It's kind of also cursed, because if you draw 3 jump aheads, it can be kind of, especially if you draw them past turn 4, they can be really awkward. But definitely the best card, and something that's very key. The second most important ramp card is the Fishbone Quill. So this one is this one is also something that you're likely to keep in the opening hand, but it does have the downside that it actually costs you a card to play. So the one jump ahead just immediately replaces itself, but the Fishbone Quill doesn't actually do anything. It just lets you turn your other cards into ink faster, and very importantly, lets you turn your uninkables into something you can ink. That is extremely important. But if you're playing against, let's say, an Emerald deck that tries to discard your cards, this card, you're oftentimes better off just inking this, because you'd go down a card by playing it. So it's kind of tricky knowing when you're supposed to just spend your entire hand just to get the ink out, or when you're supposed to just take it slow, just ink once every turn, and do it the other way. But you can get some crazy explosive starts with these. If you combine the Quill with card draw, though, it really goes off. That's what we see with the decks playing a whole new world with it. It just goes off completely. So that's kind of the way we start, and the next level is the medium stuff. What do we do once you played a one jump ahead on turn 2? And we have the Grammar Tala, 4 copies of this. When I first started playing this deck, I was a bit sus of how what the Grammar really does. But when you play against, for example, Ruby Amethyst, they have a Flynn out and a 1-drop. You play a Grammar Tala. Now all of a sudden they can't quest, and they also don't gain lore from their Flynn. It's just extremely good. Being able to replace itself against the Emerald decks, you can if you top deck it in the late game, you can dig for your good cards. And also, very very importantly, it sings how far I'll go. This is your last piece of ramp. Initially, I had 3 copies. I was not sure if you even play play all 3, because just playing turn 2 jump ahead, turn 3 how far I'll go, it's not that strong. You do get pretty far ahead, but it also costs you quite a bit. However, if you can go one jump ahead into Grammatala and then you can sing the how far I'll go, you will go very far. Like that is like a massive tempo boost. And the fact that this one, unlike the one jump ahead, is actually a really good draw in the late game, I think makes it so you have to play 4 copies. Because once you have your mana set up, you really want to make sure you get to your good cards. So I think I'm actually pretty happy to play 4 copies, but it does increase your amount of uninkables, and I'll return to this, but that's like kind of a tricky part about this deck. So all right, this is like our ramp and our mid-game setup. So what do we do when we don't have one jump ahead with the mulligan? Well, there's some other cards you can keep to try and find it. You have your Develop Your Brain, which I very often keep in my opening hand to try to look for one jump ahead if I don't have it already. And we also have Popsicle that can look just one card deeper. These cards are cards that I always keep a Popsicle every single time. It's important for your card draw engine that I'll get to later. And having a turn 1 play can be nice. Sometimes you have these on turn 1 and you're not supposed to play them. That's something very tricky about this deck. Because one advantage of these cards is that they are inkable. And there's 20 uninkables in this deck. So the most important thing when you play Ruby Sapphire is always keep in mind, like, how can I get screwed here? What happens if I draw an uninkable? Can I still play my hand like I want to? Will I have to ink something that's an important card in the matchup? So if you already have your one jump ahead, don't play it and you like have the Grammatala, whatever you want to go into. Maybe you have your Brawl, you're playing against Steel Emerald. If you have what you need early game, don't play this turn 1. You keep it either to ink it if you need to, or late game when you need to like top deck something good, this can help you dig for it. So once you get later in the game, you should also be careful with inking this because it's one of your better cards in the late game. That's like something very tricky. The Popsicle, similar thing. Sometimes you need to ink this because if you play it and you draw an uninkable, then for your draw step, you draw another uninkable, it can be quite bad. But the deck functions a lot better when it's in play, so I prefer if I don't have to ink it. And whenever I have both and I don't have a one jump ahead, it's much easier to just play the Popsicle and you ink the Develop Your Brain. So yeah, that's like a little bit of like early game tech, and these are all Sapphire cards, so that's like kind of like the core of the deck. The next bit of core of the deck is going to be the item engine here. So I'm going to pull out the 3 copies of Hiram. This is definitely a super important card for the deck. And the way it works with Popsicle, where you have your card that already replaces itself, Hiram comes down, you draw 2 more cards. It's kind of nuts. And then if he gets to stick around, if you find a second Popsicle, even like, you can quest with this and the opponent can like kill it by challenging it. It's kind of okay because they didn't quest for that turn and you drew like 4 extra cards. So like definitely a very good card. And he's kind of supported by having to play a couple extra items. These are the embarrassing ones. Your options for 1-cost items are pretty bad. You can play like the Ice Cube, or the Ice Block, I think it's called. That helps a lot with enabling your Ruby removal that I'll get to later. But it's uninkable, and as I said, uninkable is pretty bad. Most of the time, I ink this card. I ink it very aggressively, but it can be nice sometimes when you don't have a Popsicle and you do have a Hiram, you can play it out to play a turn 3 Hiram that draws 2 cards. Another advantage of this is that against Ruby Amethyst, it helps kill the castle. It's very important. Because you can play your thing, give it rush, be able to just like smash into the castle, pump your Maui, whatever you need to do. So yeah, I think the Vitality Sphere is not very good, but it's the best option we have. I hope later sets gets us something better because it's blah. And then we have the big one. This is a big payoff for both ramping and playing with artifacts. Tamatoa, or win condition. You've probably seen this card already. You know what it does. You can make just recurring Popsicles so that every time it comes into play and quests, you essentially draw a card. Quite good. If you combine it with Hiram, so it becomes 3 cards instead of 1 card, that's like when the deck really pops off. And when you have, at the end game, when you've assembled like a few items, the Tamatoa can just win super quickly. So that's like a big part of it. And the way to like round out this item package is that you have 2 copies of Lucky Dime, which will which is like your main way to win. And the main thing, like, it's kind of like, it's a quite clunky card because it's like uninkable and like it costs 7 and it doesn't do anything, right, the turn you play it. It might not do anything for the first couple turns after you play it, but being able to set up this endgame where you can just gain 14 lore in one turn, it's like absolutely massive. And you really have to plan for this. There's points in the endgame where you should stop drawing cards in Hiram. You should not sacrifice these. You should just try and amass your items. Try and count up and see if it adds up, that you can win next turn. It's very important when you get to the end game with the Lucky Dime. And also in some matchups, like Ruby Amethyst, it's really important you have 2, because you need to draw it every game. Have it early. I mean, you can't play it super early, but if you can find a spot where you can get this down and don't get super punished for it, it's quite important, because against Ruby Amethyst, you're not the control deck. In most matchups, you can just ramp, you can kill their stuff, you have inevitability, you will eventually win if you just keep prolonging the game. Against Ruby Amethyst, they will outdraw you and outgoat you and like find ways to gain lore, and you cannot stop them. So you have to stop them early so they don't win early. Then you have to kill them before they can stitch together the last lore they need. And Lucky Dime is very important for this. So somehow you have to sacrifice a turn to get it down, and then you just start using it aggressively. To gain lore with this, you try to play a Tamatoa, and then so you can activate the dime, gain 5 lore, you kill the Tamatoa. Sure, you just like have to keep doing this until you find the win. Another piece of ramp payoff here is the Maleficent. I love this card. A lot of lists only play a few copies, but yeah, here we play the full 4. It's inkable, which I think is just such a big advantage for a great late game card. I often ink this turn 1, it's totally fine, and then yeah, like in the end game, you develop your brain, you have 10 ink out. This is exactly what you're looking for to answer any problem. And like it wins quite quickly. Once this is down, they can't play the castle. It's quite good. As for another spicy one-off here, this was added during the players' meeting. I changed my deck list. I caught 1 queen and added a Sisu, a 2-drop for an 8-drop, classic deck building. I just felt like I wanted more good top decks, and especially against the Emerald Steel deck, this one is quite good. I needed like a 4th answer to the Bucky is what I thought. So it's okay, it didn't come up very much. I often just like put it in ink with my quill, but yeah, that's what happens. That's like the whole like core of like the ramp item control thing. The rest of the deck is just removal spells that help you get to where you want to be. So you have the Brawls, classic removal spell, 4 copies of Maui, and 1 copy of Hercules. So these are almost the same card, except Hercules is a lot worse. It's not inkable, but what it does do is that it kills the castle like immediately. A lot of times the Amethyst players, you'll cast a beefy pair, and they'll follow up with a castle. And you just need to clean that, and Hercules is a good way to do it. Then we have the 4 Madame Medusas, classic Ruby stable. Of course, you're gonna play this in this ramp deck. You can play turn 4, it just dominates the board. 4 copies of beefy pair. I actually don't like this card very much in the deck, because it's uninkable. And against Ruby Amethyst, you don't really want to play it, because again, you're the one who has to get on board in that matchup. But I guess a lot of other decks, especially since we don't play that many Sisus, you just have to play 4 copies to kill Bucky and whatnot. Against the Steel Song decks, like you have to play them. And then I wanted a bit more to do whenever I don't find a 1-jump ahead. And so I copied the list from top 16 list from Dallas that plays Queen of Hearts. Added 2 copies of this. It's an okay card. Again, it's probably replaceable, but it at least like helps contest the board early. And if they play a castle, you can do Maui plus Queen of Hearts to clear it. So yeah, that's the entire deck.
Yeah. And congratulations on top 64.
Yeah, thank you.
Will you be in Birmingham?
I don't know yet, but I mean the game is pretty fun, so like maybe. We'll see.
Thank you.